Happy holidays, everyone. We're coming to you from Union Station, where we're here for the annual tree lighting ceremony. And while we were here, we thought this was a good opportunity to show you some of the cool things around Union Station. Now, Union Station is hardly an obscure attraction. In fact, it's one of LA's most beloved architectural landmarks. But it has a lot of history, and there are a couple of things here that tend to slide under the radar. Every November, the historic side of the station is decorated for the holidays. Normally, the lighting ceremony takes place out on the patio, but this year it was raining, so instead it was moved into the old ticketing hall, which is just as well because this room is gorgeous and normally closed off to the public. This side of the station, with its grand waiting room, clock tower, scenic patios, and blend of Art Deco and Mission Revival architecture, is what most people think of when they think of Los Angeles Union Station. It seems so classically Californian, so emblematic of railroading's heyday, which is why it's kind of surprising that it only dates back to 1939, coming in at the very tail end of Art Deco's period of influence, and for that matter, near the end of railroading's peak. It's for this very reason that Union Station has sometimes been referred to as the last of the great railway stations. Not because it's the last one standing, but because it was the last major train station built in the US before the post war decline of train travel. Union Station's late arrival compared to its peers was the result of a long, contentious battle to even get it built in the first place. But to get into that, we have to talk a little bit about Union Station's predecessors. In the 1920s, Los Angeles had three separate train stations, each run by one of the private railroads that served the city. The biggest was the Southern Pacific's Central Station on Central Avenue between 4th and 6th Street. The Santa Fe Railroad used LeGrand Station on Santa Fe Avenue at 2nd Street on the banks of the LA River. And finally, just across the river from LeGrand, there was Salt Lake Station, built to serve a railroad going to Salt Lake City and later taken over by the Union Pacific. This last station burned down in 1924, however, and the Union Pacific moved their passenger operations into Central Station, an arrangement that was only possible because the Union and Southern Pacific had a pretty cozy relationship. Now, Central and LeGrand stations were beautiful pieces of architecture, but they had one key problem. Because they were owned by the railroads, this allowed the railroad companies to effectively dictate what traffic could move in and out of LA, essentially locking any competitors out of the market. To draw a modern analogy, it's like if an airport was owned by one airline, and if you want to fly to that airport, you had to fly that airline. Well, I guess the modern hub system kind of already makes that a practical reality in some places. So, okay, bad example. It's like if a road was owned by a car company, and if you wanted to drive oh no. City leaders wanted a unified passenger terminal that would not only centralize all the passenger train traffic, but be open to any railroad that served Los Angeles. In fact, this is what the term Union Station is referring to, a union of the railroads, which is why there are so many Union Stations across the country. There was another major potential benefit to building a Union Station for Los Angeles, and that is that it would take a whole lot of trains out of traffic. You see, in order to access Central Station, trains had to use the Southern Pacific right-of-way down the middle of Alameda Street. Literally, the trains were just in the middle of the street, sharing the same space as cars and trucks. This, to put it lightly, was a problem. But the railroads bitterly resisted the building of a Union Station, and in the mid-20s they tried one last desperate move to kill it. They put forward a proposal to build elevated rail tracks leading into Central Station to take trains out of traffic. They also promised to build some elevated sections for Pacific Electric streetcars, because the Pacific Electric was also owned by the Southern Pacific. Whatever it took for the railroads not to have to give up their monopoly. We can only speculate if the railroads would have held up their end of the bargain, but at the end of the day, it's a moot point because city voters clearly were not moved. In 1926, the question was put on the ballot, and the plan to build Union Station overwhelmingly won with 61% of the vote. There was a second question on the ballot, which was whether or not said Union Station should be built in the plaza. This debate took on a very racist character. The plaza plan entailed building the station directly on top of the plaza and Olvera Street, completely destroying the city's historic core. Both sides of the debate over this plan were concerned with the merits of putting a station in the midst of the city's original Chinatown, which, in line with the prevailing anti Chinese racism at the time, was viewed by city leaders as a den of poverty and vice. Neither side of the debate was concerned with the well being of the Chinese community. In fact, they both employed anti Chinese arguments. The anti Plaza crowd argued that LA's grand new station shouldn't be built next to a slum, while the pro Plaza crowd argued that its construction here would mean the destruction of Chinatown. And they were right. Preservation efforts managed to save the plaza and Olvera Street by pushing the station site just across Alameda, but it came at the sacrifice of the original Chinatown, which was all but totally razed to make way for Union Station. The displaced Chinese American community had to pick up the pieces and start again, resulting in the creation of the current Chinatown just north of Union Station. Today, the Chinese American Museum across the street occupies the only surviving building from old Chinatown. Even with the public vote in favor, it took many years for the construction of Union Station to begin in earnest, finally getting off the ground well into the 1930s. The occasion of its opening was cause for a massive celebration, and the architecture reflects a certain audacious civic spirit of the time. Marble flooring, travertine walls, hand painted tiles, bronze chandeliers, steel beams painted to look like wood, and of course, palm trees, the romantic view of California synthesized into one building. Across the south patio, the old Fred Harvey restaurant space preserves an important part of Santa Fe Railroad history. Unfortunately, at the time of the making of this video, it's closed, but hopefully it will reopen at some point because the space inside is glorious. The Harvey House was a chain of restaurants and hotels, possibly the first restaurant chain in the country that had a very close association with the Santa Fe Railroad and became famous for its level of service and hospitality. This particular location was the last Harvey restaurant built as part of a train station, and its interior was designed by Mary Colter, who, besides being one of the very few female American architects at the time, played a huge role in popularizing the Southwest style, incorporating Native American motifs, Spanish Revival architecture, and the American craftsman style. Her most famous buildings are at the Grand Canyon, where they heavily influenced the developing National Park rustic style. The Union Station restaurant was a more modern take, with Navajo design patterns inlaid into the floor and a sleek, streamlined bar. Again, sad it's closed. I hope it can reopen at some point. Moving into the station proper, past the piano, always popular, we entered a long tunnel that crosses under the train platforms, where passengers actually board or disembark. Along the tunnel, Metro maintains a changing series of artworks that are really well curated and give you something to look at. I'm not exactly sure how often they change. I think it depends on the show, but I want to see about once every year or two. Emerging out of the tunnel on the other end, we enter Union Station East, which I honestly find just as impressive as the historic western side. This part of the station was built in the 90s in conjunction with the building of the Red Line to turn Union Station into a modern transit center and give Metro a dedicated headquarters building. I remember the first time I visited LA, I was shocked that the transit agency was given such a glamorous building. I'm not much of a fan of postmodern architecture, but as a postmodern take on Art Deco, I think this one really holds up. Upstairs from the atrium is the Patsaurus Bus Plaza. And yes, that is how you say it. Patsaurus, like a dinosaur. Down in the atrium, there are some of my favorite artworks in the whole metro system. Above the tunnel entrance is a massive mural depicting a cross section of the city's diverse populace, underneath the impressive half dome glass ceiling. On one side of the atrium is a favorite of the kids, a saltwater aquarium with native Californian marine life, with etchings on the glass depicting Native American and Latino settlers of Los Angeles. The aquarium is one part of a larger artwork, with the other components being the mural and a third piece across the atrium embedded in a tile bench. At first glance, it's a bit unflattering, but take a closer look and you'll find a small stream of water trickling past artifacts from the original Chinatown, excavated when this side of the station was under construction. It's basically a metaphor for the LA River, very industrial and off putting at first glance, but full of history and wonder if you scratch beneath the surface. This is as good a time as any to mention that Union Station was built not just on top of old Chinatown, but on the site of Yaanga, the largest known settlement of the native Tongva people. In fact, it was the presence of Yaanga that influenced the Spanish to establish their pueblo of Los Angeles right next door. The Spanish exploited the Tongva as slave labor for many years before forcefully evicting them as the pueblo continued to expand. While the exact location of Yunga is still a matter of some debate, it is commonly believed that the center of the village sat under where the 101 now passes by Union Station. And then finally, there's maybe the most captivating artwork in here, at least once you actually know what you're looking at. This is A Train by Bill Bell, and it sits next to the escalator leading down to the subway. I know this is not going to come across on the camera, but trust me when I say that there are pictures in these lights. Flashing past, overlooked by thousands of people passing by every day, are images of classic Hollywood celebrities, historical figures, trains, buses, and taxis. It takes a moment of watching to make them out. My trick is to follow the light pattern with my gaze as they pass across the screen. A Train has another component which is even easier to overlook. The sign on the other side of the escalator has a hidden microphone that will trigger music and sound effects. To activate it, you have to say, "Hey Bill, old buddy," followed by one of the prompts, which will usually be the name of some classic Hollywood figure like Marilyn Monroe, Duke Ellington, or Judy Garland. The most popular one is to give the name of one of the actors who played Tarzan. There's a bunch of them. You can probably find a list somewhere on the internet. Just know that this thing is 30 years old, so it doesn't always read your inputs properly, if at all. That's not what I was going for, but I'm okay with that too. One last artwork I want to mention is just outside, along the ramp leading up to the bus plaza. Underneath this overhang is a painting of a tree, made to look as if you're sitting underneath it. Look closely and you'll see birds, insects, a squirrel, and even a young child climbing the tree. So the next time you're passing through Union Station, take a moment to appreciate these little treasures. Enjoy the changing of the seasons. Take in the holiday decorations. When spring rolls around, smell the jacarandas in the north patio. In September, check out Train Festival the weekend it rolls into town. Union Station has been here a long time, and they'll be here a lot longer. Thank you for watching.